In the earlier parts of this course, we talked about ADDS. We then switched gears and started looking at ways to protect our data, and we introduced the Active Directory Certificate Services, or ADCS. We've also looked at ADFS, the Active Directory Federation Services, which includes the use of a web application proxy server. And now we're going to look at a third utility that we have for protecting our data, and this is called RMS, or the Active Directory Rights Management Service. And what I want to do here is introduce ADRMS and look at steps for deploying ADRMS. So what can RMS do for you? Well, it can protect data files both on-prem, stored in a file system, or in transit. And the way it protects it is by enforcing who has access to the data, the type of access they have to data, and even the length of time they have access to that data. And a few RMS scenarios include the option to prevent propagation, which will indicate that you don't want sensitive information to be sent out by email. Restricting actions, you'll want to restrict users to be able to view a document but not edit or even not print it. And protect data, most likely on a removable storage device. If it contains sensitive data and that data is lost, this will ensure that data can't be accessed by unauthorized persons. So those are a few introductory scenarios to RMS. Components. We have a few different components that we need to be aware of. The first one is the ADRMS server, which is a domain joined and installed with the Active Directory Rights Management Service role. These servers publish their ADRMS capabilities by using a Service Connection Point, or SCP, which allows clients to locate them. And your client, speaking of which, is Windows 7s or later that support ADRMS, and this is now built into the client operating system. If the device is not RMS aware, that device will be unable to access RMS protected content. RMS apps include applications like Outlook. These are RMS aware and they can interact with this RMS protected content. We have a database that stores the configuration information about RMS in that database. It can be either a SQL Server database for larger deployments, or you can use the WID, the Windows internal database, for your smaller deployments. RMS is dependent on digital certificates, so you're going to need a properly configured PKI to use RMS. And let's drill into the PKI components. We have a server licenser. This is generated when you deploy your RMS cluster, which is a group of RMS servers. It allows the RMS server to issue additional server licenser certificates to other RMS servers. We have the rights account certificates to clients. We have a client licenser certificates, publishing licenses, use licenses, and then we have some rights policy templates. We always love templates because templates give us a baseline for creating additional policies in this case here. And we have a client licenser enabling a user to publish protected content. We have a machine certificate to identify a computer or device. We have a rights account certificate which identifies a specific user. Publishing licenses determine applied rights on protected content. And then we also have an end user license which enables a user to access protected content. So understand the difference between a client licensor, which publishes protected content, and an end user license, which allows a user to access protected content. And the steps for deploying RMS are back through Server Manager, back through Add Roles and Features. We're going to choose the ADRMS option. We're going to click Add Features. We're going to select the ADRMS role on the Role Services page. And if you want to use this with Active Directory Federation Services, you'll want to select the Identity Federation Support checkbox. You'll then click Install, and then you can choose to close that while that installation is taking place. Or alternatively, you can use PowerShell to install ADRMS by using the Install-Windows feature, ADRMS-Include Management Tools. After installing it, we have a 13-step process for configuring it. A few of the first ones are using Server Manager to perform additional configuration like we've done with the previous services. We'll have the ADRMS cluster page. We'll go ahead and click Create a new ADRMS root cluster. On the configuration database, we can choose the Windows internal database, or if we've set up a SQL Server, we'll enter the details to connect to SQL Server. When it comes to the service account page, we're going to enter domain user account details. Make sure that account is set so user cannot change password and the password never expires. And step 5 there, we're going to select the cryptographic mode 2. That's the one that we're going to recommend here. Step 6, we're going to use this for disaster recovery or when we want to add a new server to the ADRMS cluster. So we're going to use this key for that additional cluster server. On the cluster key password page, we're going to use this to encrypt the cluster key. And we'll use this when we're adding servers to the cluster. And when adding servers to the cluster, we'll have to specify this password. And on the cluster website page, you can select a website on the local server that's going to host ADRMS. That's most likely going to be your default website, which is the default that's displayed. On step 9, on the cluster address page, you're going to enter the URL for the cluster server. This is something that can't change after you've configured ADRMS server. So be careful when you enter this FQDN. And this FQDN must also be resolvable in DNS. If you're using SSL, which we're going to recommend that you do, you'll need a certificate with the appropriate subject name in order to complete this step. On step 10, on server certificate, you're going to specify the SSL certificate. You should avoid using a self-signed certificate when you're working in a production environment. And then you're going to click next on step 11. You're going to click register the SCP now. And after reviewing the information on the confirmation page, we'll click install. Let's go ahead and step out to our domain controller and look at how we deploy ADRMS. We are on domain controller number 2. We're heading back in to add roles and features. We've seen all this several times, so I'm not going to even talk you through these, but we haven't seen this option right here is Active Directory Rights Management Services. As soon as I click on it, it pops up the wizard. We're going to leave the Include Management Tools checked. We're going to click on the Add Features. We're going to go back and click Next, and we're going to click Next again. Here it's telling me things to note. To deploy ADRMS, you have to create a root cluster for certification and licensing using one or more servers. It's odd, I never heard of a cluster with one server, but it's just the way they use that term. And then after deploying RMS, you can't change the name of the domain to which the RMS server is joined. We've already discussed that. So we're going to go ahead and click Next here. And this additional checkbox is if I want to use ADFS with ADRMS. And we're going to want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next on this. If it needs to restart, you can go for it. And notice I've logged into AZMTP2, which is where the web application proxy server is. It's not where ADFS is installed. And you know the drill. I'm going to click install, and then I'm going to pause while the installation completes. And as you can see, the installation was successful, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Perform Additional Configuration. We're going to go ahead and click Next. And our first option is to create a new ADRMS root cluster versus join an existing ADRMS cluster. So I'll use this create one time, then if I want to add additional machines to this cluster, I'll use this second radio button. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and we're going to use the WID database instead of specifying a SQL Server database. And then we'll click Next. It's going to ask us for the user account. We're going to use AZMTP services, MTP services actually. And then we'll go ahead and click OK on that. Then we'll again click Next. This is where it asks about the cryptographic mode, and I recommended that we use the default mode 2. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Use ADRMS centrally managed key storage or use CSP key storage. We'll just leave the default here. We're going to supply that top secret password for the cluster. We'll click Next on that. We'll go ahead and use the default website. We'll click Next. And this is asking for the SSL encryption connection type. So we're going to go ahead and use AZMTP 1.azmtp.pearson.com. It's on port 443. This is where I can't change the address or port number after ADRMS has been installed. We've talked about that. Asking us to choose an existing certificate. Remember, we could create a self-sign, not recommended for production, or choose a certificate for SSL encryption later. We'll use the one that we already have. The server license certificate is going to be called AZMTP2. And here's the SCP registration. We'll go ahead and do that now. AZMTP 1.azmtp.pearson.com. And we'll click Next. Here's my confirmation of all of my options that I specified throughout the wizard. So I'll go ahead and click Install, and that will complete the installation and configuration of ADRMS on AZMTP2 of our domain.